My life course was looking not good as a young Aboriginal man, 14, 15, 16, 17, looking around my cousins and stuff. There was a lot of people dying at a young age or in jail, and I see that now, and they're not with us or they're really sick. You get to choose. There is a choice in life which way you go, and every single day you get choices, and you have to live with the choices that you make today that affect you tomorrow. So if that's one key message that I want any fellows to really know, that whatever decisions you make or the actions that you do have consequences for your destiny. I'm from down the Latrobe Valley in Gippsland region, from a place called Maui, and my father is an Aboriginal man. My mother is a non-Aboriginal lady, and my mother grew me up, and my father would come and see me once or twice a year, and would pick me up as a youngster and interact with me, go down and meet my family, take me down and pick me up with my uncle. I can have some early memories there. They'd pick me up and we'd go down to Lake Tyers and around to meet all my family, and there were some of the first introductions of my identity as an Aboriginal boy, and who I was. And come growing up with my mother, there was some ideal clashes there about who I was and my concept of the being of Ricky Mentha and where I fit into the world.
Can you say something about some of those clashes that involving your identity?
Well, my auntie, or my mother's family, and uncle, and that would, say some marks about my, little abo or little boom or something like that as a little boy, and or something in passing and in joking, but would make me wonder that there was something different about me to everybody else within the family. And then, I got introduced to my Aboriginality probably at an early age, and knew that I was a little bit different from the normal Australian that I thought I was. I had no idea of concept of difference growing up as a young boy, and that was actually imposed on me, I suppose.
Yeah,
would be the term that I'd be looking at using, and not too sure about that. But and then it's a whole bunch of uncertainties settled in then, I suppose, about my identity and who I was. And then I found out, asked my mum about why I've been treated differently, why I've been called differently, and others weren't being called that in my family. And she explained to me about my Aboriginality and my father and stuff, and why he comes, and my family group and my skin colouring differences. And I didn't really see through colouring differences as a child. I don't think you see the colour, and I think it's something. When kids started teasing me at school and stuff, that I did experience that as well. Was they were ignorant, and was some learned behaviours from home, and they probably had no idea what they were doing and the impacts it had on others. So all those things were directed at me as a young boy growing up, and it caused a lot of uncertainty, a lot of negativity, a lot of self-doubt about the human being, and coming to terms with that. So, and there was one stage in my life, I think I would have been about 11 or 12, that I started to deny my Aboriginality, and hearing all the stereotypes and that, and used to be ashamed about being Aboriginal. But then there was an empowerment message around 88, around with our people, and there was a lot of movement happening, and I was starting to have a bit more engagement with my cousins and whatnot on the ground level, with my father's family, and getting to meet those guys at my teenage years. And then there was a bit of a rebellion movement, and I understood that there was a social injustice bestowed upon my people, and I started to realise the gravity of being displaced, and displaced from my spirit and my birthright. And so then that really formulated my identity as a human being, then to take on the Aboriginal identity with my father's family, and really embrace my Aboriginality as a teenager, and then start being educated about the historical context, so through verbal interactions from family about the historical context, and hearing those documented stories that were verbally passed down through families about the displacement and the colonial history of Australia, and now the intergenerational impacts that it's having now in contemporary society. And so they were really hard things to come to terms with in terms of my identity, but they actually put fire in the belly and wanting to know more and then do something good for my people to take it to another level. And then identifying those barriers in life, like access to schooling, equal access to education, health systems, employment, all those fundamental key things that in life that I see in my mother's cousins and that were a gimme in life. They were automatic. You go through that and you got to earn hard, you work hard, and you get those values. I understood those values, and they're part of values that I've got now, so I'm really grateful for that. And there was a whole other set of unlearned values that my people may not, or opportunities that they can engage and embrace in, where I can actually sometimes go between two worlds and have some opportunities. But you've got to walk through those doors as well, of opportunity. So moving on, I suppose, a few years later, they were really key fundamental things to me coming to terms with who I am and where we're going and what my role was going to be in life. And I had no idea what the direction was going to be, but I knew I wanted to do something good and give something back to my people. And didn't really understand the level of the impact of poverty or the consequences of poverty on life expectancy and life course that I see a lot of my brothers and sisters going through in short lifespans, in juvenile or in correctional facilities, on drugs and alcohol at a young age, and just the self-destruction path. I didn't realise that poverty and that connection walk hand in hand, and so that's also given me some empowerment. Then having children at 16, I didn't finish school at 16. My partner's from Alice Springs and I'm from down here. We met at an Aboriginal boarding school here in Victoria, out in Healesville, called Royal College. And the lady who founded that school, her name was Hillis Morris, and she wrote Women of the Sun.
Oh.
Yeah, a very prolific lady, and her family group have had a lot to do with me coming to terms with my identity as well on my journey. And it was a very empowering school. It was it had cultural values there as well as mainstream English numeracy literacy program there. And we used to go to that school. It was a lot of the kids that come from that school had similar backgrounds to me. They were from broken homes and come from really struggling poor socioeconomic family groups and stuff, and it was intergenerational, and it was entrenched. And we didn't realise, but we had a commonality. All of us kids from broken home, we come together and then we support each other and we become a bit of a family. So, and that was the class of 92 or whatever we went through, and now we're all young adults now, and little did we know then what we know now, what we've gone through. And some have made it, some have died young age, in life course people go on their journeys and what they're exposed to and the decisions they make day to day based on their experiences and their capacities and the skills. And there's a lot of inequality in society that I've seen through my life and my existence. It's why I'm here today, is to tell that story, I suppose, of what I witnessed.
Yeah, and can you say something about, how it sort of impacted on you personally and how you sort of turned your life around when you got to Alice Springs?
Yeah.
And
Well, to tell you the truth, I was a 16-year-old boy, had a son, not finished high school, and my partner, and I started drinking. I couldn't get work. I tried, and I tried down here in Victoria, and just no doors, no opportunities would open for me, and the life course was looking grim. There was a lot of drinking. I was drinking a lot, consuming a lot of Moselle and a lot of wine, and drinking, going out, taking off, and Mrs. would be looking after the little one, and my money would go on a cycle, and it happened for 4 or 5 years. I'm our oldest. My parenting techniques changed now with my last two compared to our first one. Our first one really grew up with us as we grew, because we were 16 kids having kids, and our relationship with him was very, very strong, really thick. And we're still together, my family, so which is another hurdle we've overcome, and pretty proud of that. Been with my partner for like 23 years, so and we're still going strong, which is good, and our family's still strong. We have very strong fundamental values based on our experiences that we've had in the past. But growing up, going up in Alice Springs, I started drinking up in those cycles as well, and unskilled. So I left school as a young man, and went up to Alice Springs and got caught up in that lifestyle for about 5 or 6 years. And then my brother-in-law helped me get my licence. I was 17 or something at the time. We were probably at 18 or 19. So I was drinking for about 3 or 4 years. I was living at one of the town camps or trucking yards. And my partner's family are from the West McDonald Ranges. And so basically, one of my brother-in-laws said to me, about time you put your finger out when you get your licence and stuff, and we'll just set you free. So we went down that path and got my licence, and I was working as a woodcutter on a CDP program, a Community Development Employment program, and cutting grass and picking up, trying to do the community beautifying projects and stuff, in really harsh environments. And so I did that, and it was a $200 a week pay. And using that, my money would be split on drinking and not bringing Kimbies home for the children, and doing my father's responsibility as a young boy, and being very selfish, and not being really ready to be a father. But I actually embraced that because I never had a father. Well, my father wasn't in my life, so I made a decision when we found out that I was going to be a part of this child's life. So basically, got up to Alice Springs, had this first job. And then went out to the mines for about 4 or 5 years. So I got some work at the Granites gold mine, and I was doing some work out in the Granites gold mine for 2 or 3 years. But I was an Aboriginal health worker as well before that. So I did some training. I went down and did some training through. I did some training through Bachelor College, and became an Aboriginal health worker. And got some exposure to chronic disease working in the renal unit. It's where I started to realise then, make those connections about my story and my people and my identity and the health divide because of poverty and the impacts of that with renal failure, and seeing how many Aboriginal people were on kidney machines and dying from it, like sitting down with them for 2 or 3 years, building up a rapport with those guys, and then coming back and hearing they passed away because of kidney failure, and then learning then that it was not only kidney disease that were killing our people, heart disease and diabetes. So metabolic diseases and vascular illnesses were also having a big impact on our people. So that was my first exposure to the burden of disease amongst Aboriginal people. And even down here, I didn't realise with my family groups that in Victoria here that how prevalent diabetes is amongst the Aboriginal population, and chronic diseases, and how much damage it's doing to people and to families, and whole family groups basically are developing diseases at a young age, and it's becoming quite significantly stark, and I could never really describe it. It was something that was there and you just knew it, but now I've been working in research and in health research for the last few years, and on the projects that I've been working on, it's actually given me a descriptive narrative about piecing all those parts of the puzzle together about the structure of society and where I fit into it, and what we can do and how bad the situation is for my people. And given we're a minority, we're only 500,000 in the population, that was another bit of knowledge that was really empowering. Like, we're so small, and we're a minority in our own country. Our voice is minute. Our issues are big, but they're used as big ticket items for policy and for politics. When they need to, and it's convenient to get votes and whatnot. But that has implications on the ground when decisions are made, or if there's knee-jerk reactions that are made at a political level that impact on the ground to the people, and the guys that are really struggling. So that was an eye-opener about the structure of society, how the hierarchy works, and your socioeconomic position and poverty and disease and all those linkages to life course were a big eye-opener and really confronting for me as a young Aboriginal man, and then having a young family. So I really wanted to then break down those cycles and do better for myself. So as a youngster at Hillsville, we got taken on a tour guide through one of the unis here in Melbourne, and never ever thought that I had thought, I blew it off the day we went there, and I thought, never ever be able to come here and do this type of work, It's not for an Aboriginal person to be able to go down this path, and it's not a place for us to be included in. There was always an exclusion factor, and we use the word shame because we would be embarrassed about the spotlight being on us because we'd be, the minority in the whole school. There's the one Aboriginal person. And so there were some barriers about, personal barriers and about going and accessing higher education, and only, like I said, I only did year 10, year 11 at school, but we did some orientation stuff, and then I ended up having children, and so that just went way out of the picture. So I went down this other pathway of working, and not working, drinking for a while, and then working, and then realising where I was and the position I was in, and I'm going to have to work really hard to be responsible for my family and come good with the promises that I had made when I was younger, to myself and to my partner and to my children. So the rest is history. Basically, I've been working at.
Can I just come in there, because you say the rest is history, but somehow you got from A to B, so you took yourself back to higher education. Oh, you were,
history, and I wasn't going to cut that short. So basically, I was working. So there was a big murder that happened in one of the camps, and there was a witness there, and a fellow got his throat cut and he got hit with a tomahawk, and it was really gruesome. And it was happening in my family, this area and stuff, and there's a lot of children around, and this fellow got cut down. It was quite in your face, and we had to go to court, and there was a whole bunch of legal processes we had to go through, but that was traumatising. So I reverted from society and went to my partner's homeland, which is out in East Stanley Chasm. We got a outstation out there, and we stayed there for about 3 or 4 years. So I wasn't doing anything, wasn't working or doing anything. And then I started to feel a bit better. I got over those anxieties that traumatised, that put me through, and then I started messing around with society again. And I got some work with Tarrangere Council around the mobility of Aboriginal people from bush into town, and it was called the Mobility Study.
Yeah.
And so I was involved with doing some survey work there. So this is my journey into academia. Really, this is the pathway that the doors have opened up for me. So so basically, because I had those really strong rapport connections with community, I've been living up there 20 years. Tarrangere, I've been working with those guys. They give me a start. And I was going through this stuff that I went through, and basically there was some survey work to do for 2 or 3 weeks to go out and talk to family groups, and because I had that trusted rapport, they thought he'd be great to do some work. He's not active at the moment. Let's get him back in the game. So I went down that path, and that was really where the doors started to open for me. I went. Then there was a job that was going at the Centre for Remote Health. Under the RCBI program, the Research Capacity Building Initiative, under the PHC RED program. It was an old research capacity building initiative, federal funded one, and so it was about I think they were trying to pull up a critical mass of early career researchers and supporting those guys with their capacity. So I was really lucky, basically, and no one else went for that job, and I had to sit through a panel interview. Never done anything like that in my life, and I walked in with a white shirt, and I came out with that shirt, and I was like I was in a wet t-shirt, it was so traumatising. But anyway, I found out later I was the only person who went through it, and I had the job, and it was all about building capacity. So I was really lucky. I walked through the door. I had to go through the formal processes, and then I had some really good people around me, really good mentors. Like I said, Professor Alex Brown was one of the guys that sat with John Wakeman, Professor John Wakeman, who works at Centre for Remote Health, who were really integral in terms of taking me under their wing and building up the confidence and talking about career pathways and what you can do and what research or academia can do in terms of using it as a tool or vehicle to drive for change, and building a capacity to do that. And but it was quite hard, and it's the academic field, but it's quite rigorous process, and you need to maintain the integrity throughout it. And these words, I heard them, but I had no idea about the essence of them. And so I've learnt these words, and now I make them a part of who I am, and try to make that as driving me and my principles in terms of what I do to do some good, and with that dream of giving something back to the broader community, not only to the Aboriginal community but to the broader community as well. So there's been some really integral people that have been on the journey that have taken me down the pathway. John Wakeman was prepared to take me down a formal process pathway with the Flinders Uni. It was a University Department for Rural Health. It was in Alice Springs, and they were linked up with Flinders University. So I did some short courses around, research methodologies, introduction to some statistical analysis programs and whatnot, and really crash course stuff. But they were really basic concept courses that I got introduced in. I had to go and interact. Like I wouldn't have got anything out of this if I didn't walk through the doors. And that's a huge message that people need to take out of this, is there's opportunities around, you've got to recognise them, and you've got to walk through the doors. You don't know what they are, and the changes are always going to happen, you've just got to be adaptive. But
also though, I think you showed real resilience, because you were studying when you were living in the town camp, and you'd also just come off drinking, and you're also working for the family. So
there was a lot going on.
Heroic in a way.
There was a lot going on. Thank you.
Very
I appreciate
resilient.
it. But at the same time, it is what it is. You play the hand that's dealt, the card that's dealt. So if you can overcome those small emotional, psychological impacts that we put on ourselves, and those barriers that we put around it, those walls we build around our identity, and where we fit in the society and the world, because we look at the next person and judge ourselves to the next person based on a whole bunch of stereotypes that have been created. And I can see that with literature as well, that how that impacts on and describes a context for Aboriginal people. But who can argue sometimes with the science? So basically I was saying that there were those two gentlemen, Alex Brown and John Wakeman, that were really integral in terms of giving me the mentorship support that I needed to get through this. And so John Wakeman took me down the formal path of doing coursework and structured stuff, and then I left. Alex was working with the Baker IDI, Heart and Diabetes Research and Medical Research Institute. And he had a research program that he developed around cardiovascular disease, and he wanted some Indigenous research. He approached me to work with him, so I went down that pathway, and it wasn't a formal education pathway. It was exposure to research as a data collector around research proposals and writing up and planning, and not so much the business side. I haven't been exposed to that side yet, but I'm developing the skill to go down that path. But it really exposed me to research process about doing things with good practical integrity and with principles that don't harm the community, that is beneficial, really key fundamental information, and the practical of how to go about doing that, of good open communication and negotiation with the community around the consultation process. And so some really key fundamental principles and how you go around engaging with people and getting them on board, and not imposing your agenda on communities if it becomes their priority, and working with people's priorities. They're really good fundamental things and that he's given me and taught me in terms of how to do this stuff and do it with to do some good and not do any harm in the process. And creating towards the evidence base. So what that has also done is given me the opportunity now to then go down the path of enrolling in higher education. Now I'm at university, I'm at Deakin, studying my Masters of Public Health, and learning how to do research and in a formal process, and I think they're really key fundamental skill set development for this type of work that I've learned. And now I have to pay for it like everybody else, and that we can access these things, and then I'm there in those environments, and my children we can break cycles down, and my children can go down this pathway and do that as well. The position that Aboriginal people find themselves in, it's like comparing that we are refugees in our own country in terms of the historical context, but at the same time we have an opportunity now to either integrate but maintain our language and our knowledge and our cultural values and our sovereignty over the land, because we've never really given this land up, and we've been pushed to the side, and there's been a non-inclusive attitude towards Aboriginal people from the establishment of Australia. But I'm not to be hating on non-Aboriginal people at the same time, because it is what it is. We've got to make it work, and it's about working together, but understanding that difference is okay. It doesn't have to be the same, and respecting that, and different worldviews and the way people see the world and how they live together, and the social constructs that people live within. They're fine to maintain if they're not the same priority as white Australia or and we've gone through another era. We had a self-determination era through the 70s, where Aboriginal people went through a process to self-determination to save our nation, and we got cut down at the feet. So we're in the political arena, and I think there's a phase that we're going through at the moment where it's about integration and with our kids and our children, but also maintaining those old fights. But we're doing it in a more diplomatic approach now, and I think it's the way to go, and there's some opportunities there for the next generation to come through, but we need to support the generation that haven't had the opportunities that this generation actually have now. So I think that's a good place to leave it. I mean, there's so much injustices out there. We're not getting a fair piece of the pie, and we're living in poverty, and it is what it is. We accept that, and we are a problem, but we are so resilient. And we get skilled. We learn how to be able to play the game, and then go in there and take control, and then we can give back to our children if we are skilled, if we have the capacity to play the game.